The Boundless Authenticity Podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe to keep the conversations alive. Your support makes it all possible. On this episode, we welcome back Nathaniel Gillis, who is a paranormal researcher, author, and lecturer who has spent years studying the hidden intersections between theology, ufology, and the paranormal. Known for his provocative theory that what we call demons and aliens may be different masks of the same intelligence, he brings a fresh perspective to ancient mysteries and modern encounters alike. Through his research, interviews, and public talks, Nathaniel challenges audiences to reconsider the nature of possession, abduction, and the unseen forces shaping human history. So, how's it going, man?
Oh, it's going good. It's going good. I'm staying busy and continuing my research, necronetics, and trying to create a deeper understanding as to what we're dealing with. So I'm telling people these days that I might not have the right answers, but I hope that I'm getting the right questions. And so I think that's really all it's about.
Well, it's important to keep on thinking and questioning, because if we just sat here blindly taking in content from the internet and believing everybody else's narrative, we would actually not be learning anything or figuring anything out, right?
Oh, I completely agree. And I'm to the point now in my career where I don't believe a lot of narratives. I don't believe in a lot of theories. And I'm to the end of just the propaganda. And here lately, I've just been, I guess, staring into the abyss, wondering what role belief plays in the phenomenon, how much control of the phenomenon we have, if any. And so it's kind of put me in a category of other researchers that are, I guess, in the same pilgrimage I am in. You know, we've kind of bled through all the other archetypes. We've read most of the books. And we got to a point collectively that we just said, okay, maybe we need to throw everything against the wall and see what sticks, what's actually real. You know, I mean, we've been fed so many narratives throughout history that we've had to kind of sit with the question, start from square one again, unfortunately, and start asking the questions again. Okay, are these entities real in and of themselves? Are they apparitional? Do they have bodies? Are they interdimensional? What are we really dealing with here? Do they have a common pathology? I don't know. You know, it's just, so that's where I'm at. And I would love to tell you that I've had all the answers since the last time we've talked. Clearly, that's not true. So I guess my job is still yet to be done.
Right. Well, we seem to have a conversation every year or a year and a half or so, and the information continues to evolve. And I mean, I guess we could go through the different things that we've talked about already just as a recap, but yeah. I don't really want to do that. What I want to do is follow on with some other questions. Like, for example, in one of your theories, you're saying that these entities play by different rules. So let's make the audience very clear on what those rules are and how we can discern, you know, what's happening with those rules.
Well, the only indication we have that they are playing by different rules is because they refuse to play by our rules. The rules that we initially believed they followed, they were given to us by them, from them. And once we started to encounter them and try to work through those rules, they just blindsided us, transcended all of it. I mean, you know, look at the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory when they had conjured an entity into incarnation and then circled him with salt. They had riddled through a series of incantations, hoping to lock this entity within the circle of salt. It just jumped outside and beat the snot out of them. And so now I'm looking at the probability, not even the possibility, but the probability of them just feeding us a bill of goods, just another propagandistic narrative designed to hide the truth from us and yet at the same time engage with us as a species. I've not yet found anything that they really follow. You know, sometimes the name of Jesus works, other times it's simply not enough. So I don't know what we're dealing with, but whatever we are encountering, And I bet it either has control over our perception of reality, or it's fighting for control over reality itself. So I'm kind of along the lines of Kenneth Grant and the Collins Elite research, where they said that whatever this species is, it exists outside of the construct. It's beyond. It's not in the other room. It's outside of the house. And from time to time, they will inhabit belief. They will incarnate into this dimension, and they will anchor themselves to apports, implants, and people. And so a lot of times what we're realizing is that, number one, they aren't playing by any known rules. They're not even playing by the rules of physics. There's something that they have tapped into that allows them the ability to transcend space-time. And this is kind of where the Collins Elite, again, Kenneth Grant, Collins Elite agreed on the fact that we may be dealing with something discarnate or formerly human, that through death or through ritual magic took on the characteristics of the entities they were conjuring. And now they're included in the numbers and species of these beings. And so we're not just seeing that, we're also seeing, again, that the phenomenon is recruiting practitioners. You got Matthew Roberts, and he's a whistleblower, but he talks about witnessing a UAP. I think it was the Gimbal UAP. And he goes home and he starts to have this initiatory experience where a voice speaks to his mind, in his mind, and tells him to go pick up a series of occult books. One of them was the Kabbalion. Even names the authors that he should read. And then he has a succubus encounter, at which point he believes that, yeah, he was initiated in some kind of mystery school. So that's what we're looking at now is that the phenomenon is actively recruiting practitioners of the occult. And in whatever mystery school they're a part of, at least these practitioners that are recruiting people, they seem to be outside of the construct. And so that's why we're not just seeing that, again, the fact that they transcend space-time, but even some of the rituals that they're performing on experiencers, it seems like they're being performed on the other side, on the outside of the construct. And once we entertain and intervene with these experiences, interface with them, if you will, we're seeing the end results of these rituals being performed. And so that's when you have sigils on the body. You have to take an ultraviolet light and actually see they have script all over their hands and arms. And so then my colleagues and I started looking at sigils and what they would possibly mean on the body of an experiencer. So we started documenting cases where some of these sigils would actually induce the skin into necrosis, where it was kind of dead around the sigil itself, the symbol. You could actually take a pin and prick it, and the experiencer would not feel it at all. And so some people would suggest, okay, Nathaniel, that was just the result of some kind of experiment. No, I mean, these are supernaturally infused in the bodies of these experiencers. My colleague, Steve Mera, has had a case of an individual who he had sigils on his arm. He tried to tattoo it over it. Wouldn't work. The sigils would transcend and stick out above the tattoo. And so finally he had to have a skin graft, hoping to cover the sigils, and still couldn't cover them. So there is a supernatural quality to whatever these symbols are that transcends the little idea, right, of them being some kind of medical experiment or an impression left by a medical device. No, there is something supernatural occurring to the cellular structure of the skin. So there's like a physiological change. And we're seeing that again, not just in early demonology, but in modern ufology, where whatever these beings are doing to these people, some of them, it's supernaturally altering their skin. And now it appears that they're going through 3 stages of manifestation. It's kind of a combination of, again, of Kenneth Grant's model of sigilization and Austin Osman Spars, where the body goes through 3, again, stages of manifestation. The first thing it does, the body will absorb the sigil. The second stage is it will activate it, and then it will purge the sigil from the body. And so what it appears, just really onset here, what appears is going on to me at least is that by the time we get in the presence of these experiencers, the body has already went through one of these stages or all of them. And we get there and we see the remnants of it. And that's when you have some of them are underneath the skin, some of them are on the skin, and some of them are only seen through ultraviolet light. And so what this does, though, is it pushes the field back a little bit in understanding exactly what we're dealing with. I mean, if Nathaniel Gillis knows some of this is happening, what does our government know? And how much have we been lied to about this phenomenon? You know, I mean, if we get back into history in 1950s and you have Crowley and Parsons and Kenneth Grant, and you have these individuals who were in contact with whatever these beings are, it was no surprise that they were intertwined with the occult. It was just, okay, no big deal. We got it. You know, and it kind of evolves from that point on, where you have contactees like George Hunt Williamson, who was creating a homemade Ouija board, contacting extraterrestrials through a Ouija board to the point where he's channeling them and they're coming out of his body in multiple voices. So that's really where I'm at with the research. I mean, there are, of course, other things I could talk to you guys about, but that's the most prominent research I'm doing today. And it's getting interesting, brother.
There's a lot I could say in response to that, because one of the reasons I like talking to you is because, not that it confirms the things that I think about it, but that I've noticed these patterns. Whenever I experience something paranormal, these days, I'm just not having it. And the entity becomes aware very quickly that I'm just not going to play, and it disappears. And so I wonder inside the psyche of an experiencer whether they claim that it is a UFO that comes down above their house, an entity comes to visit them, whether that entity is malevolent or benevolent. What is the difference? Is it a person's level of belief? Is that they are in a place in their life where they are open and accepting to this? Because even things like orbs across the sky, I've seen them, but I have recently played with the idea of saying, okay, I want to see some orbs, and I'm not speaking explicitly to any entity about it. I'm not addressing anything. When I say it, I just say a blanket statement. Okay, I want to see some orbs. Let me see that this is real. And it's almost, the behavior is similar to if someone wasn't sure about you. So they would approach me, and it would always be stuff that just darts across the sky real quick. It's never going to be I already know that with me, it's never going to be an explicit event where it shows up and it's like, hey, these are orbs for you. Like it does with many people.
It's for you. 2 for 1. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I wonder, what's that about? And is there some kind of, I don't want to use the word singular, but is there some kind of intelligence behind these manifestations? Or is it multiple competing intelligences that each have their own agenda, or they're working together? I have no clue.
You know, look, I'm not claiming to have all the answers. Certainly, I do know that there is a common thematic element that my colleagues and I are calling the pre-archetype. What we're seeing throughout all of the field of the paranormal that kind of unifies it in our eyes is their corpuscular balls of light. They're orbs. Some people think they're plasma. That's fine. I can go down that road too. That's fine. But what we're noticing, even in hauntology, parapsychology, demonology, and ufology, is that these entities have the ability to create physiological constructs where they can project something, if not in our mind, into its local environment, where we would see an apparition with our eyes, look on camera, it's a ball of light. We would see a UFO with our eyes, look on camera, it's a ball of light. And we got to a point, or I got to a point at least, and I know they'll agree with me, but I'll just speak on my behalf for a second. I got to a point where I was like, it's possible that the reason we're seeing these balls of light everywhere they shouldn't be is because they're all the same phenomenon or the same species. And so you get into like Lord Auerbach and his case studies where they're actually looking at an apparition and then looking at the camera, two completely different entities. Same thing with Skywatcher. I remember one interview not too recently, but maybe about 2 or 3 months ago, where one of their scientists said that, again, we are not sure what we are observing when we are observing it. Why? Because observing it fundamentally changes what you're observing. And that's why that scientist framed it such. Is because for whatever reason, when we as a species consciously observe the phenomenon, it collapses it into various archetypes of manifestation. When the pre-archetype, right, the predecessor to a lot of this, are these orbs, these balls of light. Now, what's fascinating to me about these orbs is the fact that they can become anthropomorphic. So it's not just a ball of light. It can project apparitions of men and women. My late friend, Dr. Michael Lynch, had a case where it had picked a man up, forced him against the wall, and actually placed a handprint around his neck. Nothing was there, just an orb. We have cases of parapsychology where people have their EVP out there or their technologies out. It's fascinating. They'll put it out there like, okay, I'm looking for an EVP. Hopefully it's a Class A EVP. And they'll get an EVP and then they'll go back to the video data and say, okay, what happened around this time? And they found out that a lot of these were being transplanted in to their recorders when an orb was hovering over, over the machine. It's fascinating. And so now it's like, all right, what can't these entities do? What can they not do? Because like even in the skull experiment, we know for sure that after a certain amount of hours of experimenting, the phenomenon materialized these balls of light. And they were holding them in their hands. And the balls of light were shooting rays of light through their fingers, the cracks of their fingers. It would go inside the body and they could feel it moving over and over again through the body. It's wild stuff. And even Bledsoe, again, dealing with this anthropomorphic aspect of orbs, he believed when he's in Cape Fear, he believed that he was being followed by a person. He could hear the footfall of a man, he said. He turns around, it's just a ball of light. So what we see is not just that this phenomenon, these balls of light, the phenomenon, it's not just they have the ability to do this, it's that they are doing it. So two different aspects, right, of the research. Of course, they have the ability to do it, but why are they doing it? Why is it that some of these beings, they want us to believe they're apparitions? Why? They want us to believe that they're walking behind an experiencer. Why would you leave the handprint of a man around someone's neck? What's the purpose of that? It makes no sense unless it's the intelligence diversifying its identity. Now, here's what we can say is that a lot of the apparitions it's projecting aren't even real. Forget about the construct. In terms of their historicity, the historical reference within that area, they don't even belong. What do we make? Even this idea of the transplacement of audio into EVP tools. Look, Barry Fitzgerald and Steve Mera have actually had that happen, and they tested it against real voices, real human voices. And their data told them, it's fascinating, that these entities were not actually human voices. It was something else that had transplanted audio into their machinery, hoping and wanting us to believe they're actually human or formerly human. So even that data is compromised. And so my point here is that we're not just finding that in these various areas of research, we're now finding it even in ufology. Tyler Borland, is a whistleblower that recently testified before Congress, where he's seeing this light phenomenon begin to manifest above his head. It's coming closer, closer. All of a sudden, from the light emerges this triangular structure. Why? Like, what's actually going on here? And so that's why some of the researchers I've been in contact with here lately, we're all kind of in the same boat where we're saying, It seems to me that those are the pre-archetypes. And that means that we can't trust everything that we're seeing. It may look like a UAP. And I'm to the point now where I don't even care if it's on radar or sonar. We know they can create a physiological construct, something that is only real as long as it lasts in this dimension. It's the paraphysicality that John Keel spoke of. But I want to kind of highlight that nuance for a second. Is it real? Yes. Only as long as it exists. So even the language we're employing to describe this particular phenomenon is trapped. It's trapped by our understanding of physics. And so what we do know is that the same phenomenon that can materialize a craft that can be metallic can dematerialize it into nothing. Nothing. And this is why our pilots are saying, okay, it's on radar, but we can't see it. Or we can see it, it's not on radar. It's flipping, it's vibrations, and we're stuck in the construct going, that shouldn't be here.
It's kind of like steam on a glass. It exists until it doesn't, right?
Until it doesn't. Yes. And so what does that mean for the field? Well, I can tell everybody what it means. If it's a ball of clone, by the way, if the phenomenon can materialize a physiological structure, a construct, a bottle of clone, and I go around telling everybody about this bottle of clone, does the bottle of clone really exist? Probably not. It might just be the byproduct of something wanting me to believe in the bottle of clone. Why else would it not exist when they don't want it to, but exist when they do? Again, it's not something that really fits into our reality. It's literally just something that incarnates and the phenomenon uses to moderate human behavior and human perception. Now, we're even going a step further in the research and saying, okay, not only is it that not everything we're seeing is real, like we already know that, like there's something else going on here, much, much deeper than meets the eye, but we are often blinded by our own vision to where by the time we interface with this phenomenon, it's already collapsed itself through the observer effect into a construct where it's us and not always the phenomenon. And that's why it would play a role, like right with Dr. Gary Nolan. He had a case study of a young boy in France. We've had many of these throughout the years where he's in a car with his family and looks up, he sees this UAP, but by the time he observes it, it's constructed itself into something that does not represent at all what it really is. And so that's, again, there's a difference between when we consciously observe it and when technology observes it. It's fascinating. And so he begins to describe to his mother what he's seeing. So she goes, okay, that's funny. Takes her iPhone out, snaps a picture. Two completely different structures. The problem is, if the first structure isn't real, and we're applying belief and doctrine, tradition, folklore, mythology surrounding a structure that isn't even real, oh my God, what have we done? I'll tell you what, we've done hundreds of years of research surrounding areas that we shouldn't have. They're just the phenomenon. Literally using constructs to propagandize our species, to believe in one thing is here when it's something completely different. And so it puts us researchers in a very unique position because now we have to change up our approach. What do we do now? Well, okay, so like that's kind of what I'm doing here lately is looking at the footfall, looking at the footprints of the sand or the snow, as I've always put it in times past. But now we would know, okay, not everything we see is real. In addition to that, we know that they may appear as one thing, and that may seem real. They may not even be that. And so we have to look like an underlying pathology here to understand what's actually going on. And that's when you start to get into cases where people are being abducted by entities that appear to be loved ones, ghosts. I just received a case study about a week ago of a twin, an identical twin, who her and her sister were born from the same womb, same mother, same father. One of them experienced aliens, the other experienced ghosts. And at the end, they kind of said, oh, yeah, we went through the same thing, but we experienced it differently. Now, that's where we're at, is, again, the phenomenon is tailoring its incarnation to our neurology and to our conscious observation of it. This gets where Dr. Gary Nolan has kind of realized that there are anomalies on brain scans of experiencers. And he's kind of testing them. Have you experienced paranormal activity? Sure. Okay. Because you have this anomaly on your brain. We've noticed it through the brain scans. They go to the second generation. Have you had paranormal activity? Absolutely. Okay. Because you also have that same anomaly on your brain through brain scans. They go to the third generation. And now they're like, well, yeah, I've never experienced paranormal activity in my life. Okay, then why do you also have, it's the pathology's evolving. Why do you also have an anomaly on the same part of your brain that we've captured on brain scans? And so what that implies is that we always thought the phenomenon was tailoring itself to us. It's true, but it might not be tailoring itself to us for us. Right? As in, I'm just targeting you. No, it might be, again, like a pathogen, a parasitic pathogen that is changing our bloodline or kind of infiltrating our bloodline in order to affect one individual down the road, to where the individual doesn't even have to experience the phenomenon. It's not out there now, it's in here. Now, that is troubling because we have seen behavioral patterns of that in demonology, where I've even had cases myself, my friend, where it's usually women, and I'll get an email from my husband where my wife is being targeted, my mother's being targeted by an entity, and we'll go through the bloodline and find out that it was a practitioner of the occult, working with an entity. And now that entity has infiltrated the bloodline, just like the phenomenon, and now it's knocking on her door. See, again, the ideal is always that because the phenomenon is tailored to me, my neurology, that it must be tailored for me. And I don't believe that's what we're dealing with. It's no different than Jackie Hernandez's case in San Pedro, California, where the malevolent haunting spread out like a flood in the streets of her local city. And now it's everywhere, from that original location and incarnated to houses everywhere on her street. So that's the purest pathology of this intelligence, is that once it incarnates, it will target people. And I think that means, more than anything, that means we have to, again, start from square one, notice the mechanics and mechanisms behind it, and be gutsy and humble enough to say, okay, yeah, we kind of fumbled the bag here. We got to start over again and start looking at this through the lens of a parasitic intelligence.
Okay, and to add some contrast to that, what can you say about UFO experiencers who have been healed by some non-human intelligence? What's that about? Is that like a bargain? That they
I don't know. Well, I think, again, I study the darker aspects of the phenomenon. The most correct model I've encountered in my research, and I'm going to answer your question in a second, I promise, but I'm going to kind of tie it into this number here, is that we're dealing with formerly human practitioners of the occult, and they have been recruited by the phenomenon. The reason I say that is because some of the sigils we're finding on experiencers are earthborn, and they require human agency. So that model, again, would demonstrate a species. It would manifest a species that would be focused upon their rituals and their worship of scientism and science. It would be the exact manifestation we saw with Crowley and Parsons, where Parsons realized that, yeah, I'm working with these entities to gain access to technology. So it wasn't science or spirituality. The model that would be a dichotomy. This is a duality. That's what I'm talking about, to where we would be looking at practitioners and scientists at the same time that are still practicing. their rituals and their experiments. I have no problem in my model with people that have gotten healed by positive entities. I've never ever said, right, in my lectures that I don't believe in positive entities. It's kind of like somebody like a cancer, like an oncologist, a cancer doctor, right? I went to a cancer doctor. He never mentioned anything about somebody giving me a nice massage. It's like, well, yeah, of course they happen. They work, whatever. But because I'm in this field, again, my attention has always been on the pathology of the darkness. And thankfully, we're starting to put these pieces together. But however, even if we go back to biblical antiquity, we start to realize that even the demonic moniker was only placed on entities depending on the messages they gave people. If they did something bad to you, it was automatically a demon. If they did something good for you, it was automatically an angel. And it got so convoluted that even some of the authors of the Bible was like, yeah, the Satan, he will masquerade as an angel of light. Why? Because if it was that easily discernible, we wouldn't even have to have a conversation. You would just automatically know. But it's not. It isn't. And unfortunately, even some of the work, again, that Stephen Barry have done, where once the phenomenon incarnates, we have maybe 35, not even that, maybe about 20, 25 minutes. Or no, not even that. Oh my God. 20 to 23 to 25 seconds is what it was. Forgive me. And before the phenomenon induces the experiencer into theta brainwave activity. That's a fact. Early on in demonology and in ufology, we've had cases after it's crazy. It was perverse. It was like, my God, it's everywhere. Where the experiencer would just say, yeah, I don't know what happened to me, but I just became real docile. I just induced in like a trance-like state. I had no control over my body. And then when the phenomenon was done, doing whatever it wanted to do with these people, it lets off, right? It's like, all right, yeah, I'm done doing whatever I need to do. I'm done forming a construct. I'm done managing your perception of me, and everything's well. You have a good night. And the stupor lifts, and they start to realize what happened. So we knew that was occurring. It wasn't until recently, well, relatively recently compared to history, that Barry Fitzgerald and Steve Mira have actually put brainwave monitoring units on experiencers and said, all right, specifically, one was a practitioner of CE5. Go out to this location where the phenomenon's leading you, right? Do your protocols, go through the CE5 method and see if the phenomenon incarnates. And when it did, again, within 23 seconds, the phenomenon had induced the experiencer into theta brainwave activity. All bets are off. The phenomenon has now created a conscious connection, and you have no ability at many times to cut it off. And so that's when the phenomenon hijacks, not hitchhikes, but hijacks consciousness. And again, like a pathogen, now begins to incarnate, boom, boom, into people's lives. And so it's a troubling part of the research because, sometimes the phenomenon pushes back. But more than anything else, I think that what we are dealing with, again, is something that is almost in charge of the artificial habitat. And when it does manifest, it has to manifest in certain ways so as to not lead us, I should say, in the direction of the thinning of the veil. What do you mean, Nathaniel? Okay, it's like the Truman Show. There were moments when Truman starts to realize, okay, this can't possibly be a coincidence. The black cat in the Matrix. What is it? It's a glitch. It's when you're at the stop sign and the person that always walks in front of you trips for the first time in 6 years. What are you doing? Well, that's kind of weird. That's an anomaly. That's paranormal. What is that? And so here's Truman. He starts to realize what's going on, at least portions of it. And then he goes into a grocery store where his friend works. And he starts to look at how everything was being monitored and controlled. And he starts to go behind the scenes. And as soon as he does, he starts to see that the nature of the environment changes. You see people who are the producers of the artificial construct in charge. And so what they did is they employed the control mechanism that Jacques Vallée often mentions, where they actually put people in his way. No, no, don't go here. Don't look over there. Let's go over here. Let's have this conversation over here. Why? Because the phenomenon doesn't want us to see what's going on behind the construct. So that's what we're dealing with. And again, I mean, I'm excited. You know, I'm really burnt out. Though, as you can tell, I'm almost losing my voice. I didn't have a voice this morning. But whatever we're dealing with, I think that's more along the lines of the correct model, and it's in charge.
Okay, so well, with that, it would be interesting to see if there's anyone that's actually bridging any parallels between positive experiences and negative experiences to see if there's any overlap to that. I mean, I don't study the phenomenon, but I often wonder. But let me tell you this story about the Bible story. So a couple of weeks ago, this actually happened. Someone gave me a leather-bound Bible that was from like the early 80s. As soon as I got this Bible in my possession, strange things started happening around my house.
Mm-hmm.
First, it began with a couple nights in a row feeling like I was being watched while I was sleeping. On the third night, I was laying on my right side and I looked up and I just said to it, I don't really think you're going to get very far doing that. And I went back to sleep. Message received by said entity. The next night, it unplugged the air filter on my fish tank and threw it across the floor.
It's not nice.
I got up and I said to it, you're not going to get very far by doing that. The next day, I started wondering, something has to be up with this Bible. And I asked myself the obvious question, why would a Bible, a supposed piece of literature that is directly tied to the Word of God, be the cause of this problem? Is it the previous owner of the Bible? Is it that whatever leather bound casing it's in has been touched by some person that was an occult practitioner or something, and this Bible just made its way to me? Because the person that gave it to me is not a bad person, and they're not into any of that kind of stuff. You know, for all intents and purposes, I'm sorry when they hear this, but they're an NPC as far as I'm concerned. And, you know, they don't know much about anything harmless. So the next day, I made a pot of oatmeal to feed one of my pets, left the kitchen, walked about 20 feet from the kitchen, and immediately heard said pot of oatmeal hit the floor, completely covering the entire kitchen. I knew what was going on, so I didn't have a reaction. I just very quietly, without changing my energy to anything of frustration or otherwise, stayed neutral and cleaned up every drop of oatmeal without saying a word. The very next day, I gave that Bible back, and there has not been an incident since.
I can tell you this, my friend. Number one, that some of these entities do not like any religious artifacts whatsoever. I was reading a book, Dark Gods, and they gave a case study of a man who was working with guides, and he, again, they were benevolent. And I believe a lot of entities are like this, by the way, where they're not really guides. They're not really benevolent. They kind of lead you a certain direction, use you, because they know people won't push back. They will not answer, or they won't ask them questions. But anyways, this gentleman walks by a revival church service going on. He hears the hymns, church hymns being sung. And he goes to walk into the church and he stops. Something stops him. And one of the voices of his guide says, don't go in there. We do not want you to go in there. Don't even worry about it. We're all you need. We've got your back. Everything's fine. Well, he went in for about 10, 20 minutes, and that's when the preaching started. He's like, you know what? I'm going to get out of here. So he skips, goes home that night, goes to bed. And in the middle of the night, he hears this voice basically castigating him for not obeying what they told him to do, right? We told you we didn't want you to go into that church. Didn't you hear us the first time? And so that's when he realizes that there are two very strong hands wrapping themselves around his neck. and he is nearly dying. Like he's almost cast out. That's when he's fighting for his life and he's trying to turn the lights on. Finally, he realizes that they were his hands wrapped around his own neck. They had possessed him and forced him to choke himself nearly to death. So we do know that there is an aversion to religious relics and artifacts in some of these beings. And, obviously, of course, the Vatican would suggest, okay, that's because they're horns and hooves. Okay, I guess they have a reference for certain translations. I don't know. But whatever we're dealing with, my friend, it does like to play roles. And I just don't trust a lot of it anymore. And what I've done here lately is kind of just stayed in my own lane. You know what I mean? There's a lot of researchers that are like, oh, that's not it. It's like, okay, I don't know everything, but the things that I do know, I really know. That's really where I'm at.
Fair enough. So how do you guard against confirmation bias or leading yourself into paranormal conclusions?
I look at data. I look at evidence. My career is riddled with moments where I came full circle, or I just abandoned the dogma and embraced the data. I grew up hearing that everything was demonic, and even as a demonologist, I came to the realization that no, there are in fact entities that will wear that moniker, just so we really don't know who or what they are, and that there are life forms. Even if, again, I'm a proponent of the single field theory, at least with the darker aspects of it, that we're dealing with one umbrella from which all the other entities come from. But I knew that there have been cases where the phenomenon will play the role of the demonic, because it's just, again, it's a cultural artifact. It's not the D-Book in Safdi Israel. It's not the jinn archetype in Islamia. It's just, right, whatever the family Christian bookstore would think a demon is, that's what the phenomenon incarnates as. And a lot of these manifestations aren't even biblical. So when people come to me and like, oh, that has to be demonic, it's like, okay, according to which translation? Because whatever that is, it's not. And so then you have to compare the archetype to the actual literature. And that's what a lot of this does fall apart. And you start to realize that a lot of this is just a ruse, a performance, a theatrical stage managed performance on the part of the phenomenon. Right? It's what I meant when the phenomenon creates physiological constructs. It's an archetype. There may not be, again, it may look like a tree, but there's no root system. And so you have to go back through history to look at the root system and say, okay, let's compare the two. If this is a demon, again, I've had studies behind me in the Vatican archives, where taking the Vatican archives rather, where you hear these cases of possession where the entity is talking about, yeah, I'm a demon. It's like, okay, the priest goes, well, why don't you like holy water? And the guy goes, well, the entity goes, well, it reminds me of the time I got baptized. No. Demons never, again, compare that to biblical and particularly the writings. No, they never got baptized. Why? Because they did, okay. Baptism is for the remission of sins. That's not what we're dealing with. Sorry, And so it's those moments, it's crazy, where I look at this stuff and it's like, I'm afraid that the Vatican knows that too, where in the 16th century, the two dominating theories within demonology was that, yeah, sure, there are some entities that were never earthborn. They're not wandering spirits. They were created, but they're not human. And then others, this is in the Safdi Israel and some of Isaac Lurio's work, where, yes, some of the other demonic entities, well, they could be formerly human beings. And that's what blew my mind when I'm looking at the D-Book phenomenon in Safdi, and you have cases of entities that are possessing people and solving their own murders. Where, like, if it was Nathaniel Gillis, I possess probably some guy that loves to eat Italian food because I love Italian food. And I just be like, hey, by the way, somebody killed me. This is what happened. Somebody killed me. He stabbed me. Here's his address, right? And he's at the house right now if you want to go get him. That's what happened. The authorities would go to the house. He had one case, my friend. where the possessing entity solved his own murder. And when the authorities went to the murderer's house to investigate, the murderer came out crying with a knife, gave him blood and knife, and started weeping and saying, his ghost won't leave me alone. I was just about to confess anyway. He won't leave me alone. So that's when my world expanded into, what? What's going on here? And so that's what kind of helped me grow out of some of the dogma and grow into the data. And I'm sure people are going to watch and say, well, the Bible says it's appointed for once a man to die. Okay. But again, in Pauline Christology, he was talking about the sin offering and how the priest would offer up the sacrifice and God would judge the sacrifice and then the judgment would come. And then he was saying basically that, Yeshua, Jesus has become our sacrifice and the high priest. He's the man that's appointed once to die. It's the Day of Atonement. So he's not talking about the afterlife. He's just talking about the Day of Atonement. So that's what I had to deconstruct some of what I was taught growing up and look at this objectively and say, okay, maybe some of this is false. And if that's the case, right, what else was I taught that was biblical that's not biblical at all? It was dogmatism, given to me by people who had the best of intentions, right? But the worst of scholarship. There's nothing wrong with that as long as we can be honest with the data and say, hey, listen, there's some finicky stuff out there.
So if you could ask one question of this overarching intelligence that's doing this and get a direct, honest answer, what would it be?
Oh my God. I don't know. I mean, I've been asking that questions forever in my own way, my own research. Are we living in a construct? How do we escape it? More or less, just one or two. Hopefully it's like a genie and I'll get like 3 wishes, or something. I mean, I have friends that have encountered what's called DVP, a direct voice phenomenon, where EVP is electronic, where it's like, you can capture it on your technology and record it and play it. Direct voice phenomenon would be something like I experienced when I was a kid, where you have voices hovering in the air above you, and they're calling you by name, and they're speaking to you. Terrified me, by the way. I was scared up. Like, what? And they got in front of the phenomenon and said, how many dimensions are there? One question's fascinating. One question was, is there a heaven? And here's why I'm kind of like, well, even if I did ask the phenomenon something, would it be honest or would it be cagey? Because this answer was cagey. Is there a heaven? The phenomenon responded, yes, for those who make it. Okay. Yeah. So again, my point is that there's an orchestrated effort on the part of whatever this intelligence is to constantly stop us from moving beyond the veil. If I'm not supposed to be there, it will not let me. If I'm not supposed to go there in my research, it will not let me. There's always this stage managed performance that, again, there's only a certain amount of knowledge it will allow us to have, and it's in complete and utter control.
There is definitely a certain level of interference. For example,
oh God, yeah,
I sent you a message quite some time ago. I came across this on Facebook, and the person wrote, has anyone experienced something similar? I had an attack in my sleep last night. I went to bed listening to that meditation/frequency music on YouTube. And ironically, this isn't the first time something weird has happened under those circumstances. I was awoken by something telling me to look at a particular part of my room, and I saw what looked like a hologram type thing moving around. I was actually a bit scared because I didn't feel a good vibe. Next minute, it turned into a bright orb and it flew over to me at a fast speed and tried to knock me over and hurt me. I grabbed it with both my hands and it became tangible like an egg almost, still lit up, but had a sort of a veiny appearance. I held it and was pushing it away from my body at the same time and screaming at it, get out of here, you're not welcome. But the more I tried to yell, the more I was losing my ability to say anything. So in a panic, I just started to scream Jesus over and over. That was the last thing I remember until I woke up this morning, and it felt very real. I've had a lot of encounters in the past, but never with something that almost resembled some type of egg. And Instagram wouldn't let me
Where's this
to you.
Wow, because that might have been around the time when I was researching Lamb and his representative in Jake Barber's film, The Egg UFO. That's fascinating. Thank you. Try to send it to me again tonight so I can.
I tried to send it to you. Get this. I tried to send it to you at September 22nd at 1:22 a.m. And I said, dude, what the fuck is going on around the world? And it would not send.
You know, brother, let me tell you what. I have a compendium of Lamb practitioners and their diaries. And there for a while, this is crazy because you mentioned an egg or something like it. There for a while, every single one of these Lamb practitioners were being told to prepare for Lamb because Lamb was coming in an egg. So I'm interested in that for sure. So send that over, man, and I'll look at it because it most likely will fit into exactly what what I'm doing here lately in my research. But there exists a species, I believe, on the earth today that are a particular species of practitioners for that matter. And I believe that they have yet to be quantified and characterized in demonology. And so I think that they're in between a demon and a practitioner. I don't know what to call them. I do know that they're performing necronetics. And I do know that some of the, again, ways that these symbols are forming in and on skin, it's supernatural. And so we have to answer for that. Why is that happening? What's going on? And so that's why I believe, that necronetics is going to be bigger than me, hopefully. And I already have people that are like kind of lining up that have been researching this phenomenon. They didn't know what they were researching. They didn't even know what field they belonged to. And it's fascinating now because, I get to have conversations with them and they add pieces to the puzzle. And so I'm really excited. And I do appreciate you having me on, man. It's always a pleasure.
Well, of course, you're always welcome here. Thanks again for being on the Boundless Authenticity podcast. Tell everyone where they can find you.
So you can find me on Instagram under Nathaniel Gillis. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel, Nathaniel Gillis, as well. And if you want, I'm starting my own paranormal platform called Parasymposia. And if you guys want, you guys can go to parasymposia.com and sign up for early access. It's my platform, and I'm going to be doing all of my research there. And you'll be publishing my writings, my lecture series on necronetics, and it's going to be a blast. But you guys can go there and sign up for early access. With that said, brother, thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the Boundless Authenticity podcast. You're listening to the Boundless Authenticity podcast, where we discuss everything related to the evolution of human consciousness.
At the very least, people need to understand that the United States builds bunkers, which are basically cities underground, every 3 months.
Basically, when you dream, you tap into your subconscious. It is your nocturnal intuition, your creativity and imagination unchained from conscious reason, ego and logic.
They're biologically alive, but they have no soul. They have AI consciousness. They can alter your consciousness of the brain if they get the brain.
We live in a multidimensional reality, whether it comes through esoteric information in the spiritual realms or the UFO people, experiencers, or mainstream through quantum physics and through mainstream science now realizing that parallel dimensions probably exist.
We're all spiritual beings. We're all having these human experiences. We've heard that phrase over and over and over. But what does that really mean? All the big questions of life, we have these answers inside of our souls.
We're ultimately studying the nature of what it is to be human, good and evil, our psychology, how we think, and our health. That's why I love Bruce Lee's great quote, all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge.
The Boundless Authenticity podcast.